as you know, I'm surprised. But all of a sudden, to me, your movie seemed 1,000 times more brilliant when I realized that it was a short story posing as a documentary. But at the same time, it seems like it would be impossible to indicate in the movie that it is such without destroying the effect. So the effect depends on this kind of situation, right? Or,
yeah, it does. But it's also a really hazardous thing to do, because you are also, because I guess, you know, quite frankly, I have a certain status or reputation, and so that means that the film could get invited to certain places and be presented in a public way, which would then present ideas which do not reflect a place which is actually undergoing an upheaval right now. So I think there's something, first of all, there's something essentially obscene maybe about setting a relationship or a narrative conceit in a place which is being tortured, which is undergoing, you know, really a terrible moment. And that wasn't anticipated, and I just didn't expect that it would kind of explode so immediately soon after the film was made.
Right.
So, you know, the beautiful thing with something like this, because there was no money involved, I just did it, and there was no budget.
Right.
I have no responsibility to show it to anyone. There's no broadcaster attached. I could just do it as a creative exercise, which is really what it is. And so I'll end up just showing it in those, you know, in these sort of circumstances, I guess. This is actually a large group. I mean, I've never, you know, it's usually been for much smaller groups of people.
So Mary, one question. I mean, you've touched one issue before. I mean, you basically the fact that the entire history of Lebanon is, or the architecture of Lebanon, as we understand it, is basically defined by its incisions, so to speak. We also saw that architect with the unfinished building, and a rather interesting desire to leave the scars, I suppose. Which is quite interesting, because I think last year we had Lebios Woods here, who had a similar idea when it came to Sarajevo, which was quite interesting, because I mean, you deal there with the confrontation of the actual feelings of those people who eventually went through that, the pain, the loss of the arm, the limbs, the sensation. And then you do the very same thing with the film itself. So, I mean, how many scars do we actually need to transform or transmit memes into? I mean, do we actually need to institutionalize memory in that case?
Well, there's an interesting quote at one point, which is actually just I think it's ripped off from Immanuel Kant, when, you know, you deny, you know, knowledge in order to accept faith, right? You know, like at a certain point, you know, there are certain structures that you just have to let go if you want to sustain this place where, you know, what defines do we actually bear scars? It's funny, we were just talking about this today. I mean, like, is it something that is transmitted through memory and through something that people are able to relate through generations, or do we need something which exists as an artifact? And how prepared are we to read that? I mean, if the artifact exists and we don't have the ability to read it, then its use, its function becomes absurd, right? So, and you know, the problem is, if we have an artifact, do we then relinquish our responsibility to sustain curiosity and engagement? You know, where and how do we define those links? And sometimes I think that when something becomes an object of faith or of adoration, you know, you perhaps diminish an actual ongoing relationship that can grow because it's too fixed. So to have a monument, let's say if you keep the Holiday Inn, or if you keep some shattered remnant, I mean, at a certain point it loses its meaning, I suppose, unless you're able to have a really engaged generation of readers, you know, and that's the challenge. And I suppose it's particularly challenging in a culture which is overwhelmed by, you know, all sorts of narratives that are being played simultaneously. You know, that the ability to define which ones are meaningful. And again, this is something that's my new film is dealing with, I hope, anyhow. You know, that there's this ability now to create fictionalized identities, which is incredibly appealing, you know, but then where does our responsibility, you know, reside in how we conduct ourselves with those that, you know, we're closest to? And it's a curious moment. I don't know if any of you have ever played Second Life. Have you? You look guilty. You have, right? You're addicted to it. You know? No, but it's a really odd thing. It's a very odd zone to kind of negotiate. You know, and now I think is it Sweden who is now officially issuing passports through Second Life? And you go through the same, you know, you basically go through a complete analysis of your Second Life character to get a passport, which they're saying is, you know, actually functioning in a kind of this virtual place. So I don't know.
And the first life, that's good enough.
The first life, right? Would that we all have those first lives that are good enough. We're all envious of you.
I like your, just one comment. Okay, just like your, actually, when you put together very serious comments by your wife that she witnessed the murder, witnessed killing people. She's seen those pictures of torture. And then you have these things going on with your wife and her guides, like in a calendar, the same. And you're actually doing the same thing. So it's like you're going from, you know, this very serious into a very, this, like you were saying, nerdy, like, you know, relation between you and your wife and supposedly guide. And
it's weird how the guide comes back in. That wasn't really intended, but you're right. It's exactly like calendar.
But it's like, exactly when you're filming this and like, you know, for 2 minutes you are just taking a shot and they don't realize you are the same thing, almost identically. It's
it's curious. Though less formally.
But basically I like this juxtaposition of these two elements, which I think the documentarians would like not to have together.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Allow you to go, use the idea and direct.